In our quadratics unit, quadratics have standard form. Now remember, quadratics are the nice U shapes, correct, everybody? Quadratics are the nice U shapes. So that's what unit we're in our parabola quadratics. We learned last time how to graph a quadratic in standard form, and we learned about axis of symmetry, and then the zeros, and y-intercept, and stuff like that. So today we're just going to learn how to take a quadratic, the equation of a quadratic, and factor it. So this is standard form of a quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c, and is equal to 0. So that's the first thing we have to do before we factor a quadratic is put it in standard form. Standard form means highest degree to lowest degree. So see how this is degree 2, degree 1, and then there's no x. So highest degree to lowest degree is standard form. The other most important thing is that your quadratic is set equal to 0. So if it wasn't set equal to 0, we have to fix that first. Okay, so we're going to take a quadratic in standard form that's equal to 0, and we're going to factor it. The first thing we ask ourselves always, no matter what, anytime we're factoring is, does the polynomial, and same with quadratic, does the quadratic have a greatest common factor? So we know how to do greatest common factor. We did it on the last test. And if it's a yes, if there is a greatest common factor, then we're going to factor it out in the very beginning. And if no, then you're going to continue to factoring a quadratic. And that's these steps, which you have the steps listed on your paper. Now, right now, I understand. Literally every year, guys, it's not just for you. We're going to talk about the steps, and you're going to say, I have no idea what she just said. It's not going to make sense until you just see many examples. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go through the steps, because then once you see the steps in an example, then when you refer back to them, you'll understand what I'm saying. Does that make sense? So if you need to refer back to steps, after we've done examples, you'll understand the steps, but not probably till then. Okay, so we have a quadratic in standard form, highest degree to lowest degree. It's set equal to 0. So what our first step is to do is to identify A, B, and C. Now A, understand A is just the number in front of x squared, not the x squared part, the number in front of x squared. B is just the number in front of x. And C is our constant number. So that's our first step. Now you have these written down on your paper. Our second step is we're going to do what multiplies to be A times C. So we're going to multiply. Once we figure out what A, B, and C are, we're going to do what multiplies to be A times C and adds up to be B. So we're going to do this little chart, and we're going to list out factors of A times C. So like 3 times 2 would be 6, correct, everybody? So A times C, if it was a 3 and a 2, we'd have a 6 right here. And then let's say, let's say B right here, this value was -1. Or let's say that this B value was -1. We're going to find the factors that multiply to be +6 and add up to be -1. And we'll do that slowly in a second. And then once you've identified your factors, the two things that multiply to be 6 and they add up to be -1, we're going to I call it drop and break. So you drop down your n terms, you drop down ax squared, you drop down c, and then we're breaking down the middle term. We're going to rewrite the x as these two factors, but with an x. Then we're going to have 4 terms. When I say 4 terms, I mean 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Terms are separated by plus or minus signs. So we will have 4 terms, and then we'll factor by grouping. So we'll group the first 2 terms, we'll group the second 2 terms, and then from there, I call it the final factor. You'll factor out, you'll look at each group, you'll factor out the greatest common factor out of each group, and then you'll be able to check your safe haven, which you don't understand what that is right now, but I'll explain. It's what's left in your parentheses. And then 6, you should have the product of 2 linear factors. So understand something really quick. If we have x to the first, isn't that degree 1? Everybody? And then if we have another x to the first, that's degree 1. So we should have in the end 2 degree 1 being multiplied together. That's called 2 linear factors being multiplied. Now I understand that made 0 sense. It did. Made 0 sense. I know that. It's not going to make sense until we do it very slowly and go through an actual example. But then you'll be able to refer back to that and say, oh yeah, now I know what she's talking about. So here we go. Now just understand there's at the bottom I was just showing you, The reason we're factoring, and not today, we're not going to do it, but the reason we learn to factor is because it helps us find the zeros, or where it crosses the x-axis. So if I didn't give you a graph, or if I didn't have you graph it, and I said, what are the zeros? You could solve it by factoring, but today we're just learning how to factor, period, not solve by factoring. So anyways, kind of interesting. All right, here we go. Problem number 1 on your class note page. We have n squared minus n minus 42. So this is no different than having x squared minus x minus 42. They're just using a different variable. Is everybody comfortable? Yes. Are you sure? On the back page of this. Sorry. Yeah, this one will be your practice. Sorry, there's 2. So on the back page of this. Is everybody in the right spot? Once again, you zone out for a half second, you're going to be lost, and this is you will not pass the class if you can't factor. Like, it's not an option. Okay, so my first step is, let's read our first step. It says, identify A, B, and C. So we're going to identify A, B, and C. Remember, quadratics have the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So first of all, my A value is in front of x squared. So my A value is a 1, correct? Everybody? If you don't understand, you'll have to make sure you ask. And then my B value is, well, that's like having a negative 1. So my B value is negative 1. And then my C value, we've got to take the sign with it. My C value is negative 42. So really, you can't be afraid to ask questions today. Just say like, hey, where'd you get the 42 from again? Or if you do have any questions, please ask them today. Everybody good before we got A, B, and C from? Okay, we'll go on to our second step. Our second step is to do what or our third step, I guess, technically on the paper. We're going to do what multiplies to be A times C, and I always draw this in, even to this day, and adds up to be B. So we're going to take and multiply A times C. So isn't that 1 times negative 42? What is that? What's 1 times negative 42? Negative 42. So our A times C is negative 42. And then we're just going to put B in. B is negative 1. So now what we're going to do, and I want you all doing it, is you're going to take your calculator. We're going to list out all the factors of 42. Factors mean what multiply to be 42. We're not going to skip any until we're really, really good at this stuff. So this is how you do it. So take your calculator, do 42 divided by 2. What do you get? So make sure you guys have a graphing calculator. So 42, even if you don't, you can do it. What's 42 divided by 2? So we're going to write this out. 2 times 21, we're not going to put in the signs till later. So we're just listing out factors of 42. We're not doing anything with signs. What's another factor? So do 42, guys, divided by 3. 14. So 3 times 14. Do 42 divided by 4. 10.5, so we're going to skip that one because it's not going to be a decimal that we're going to use. So then keep going, divided by 5, divided by 6. 6 times 7, and then 42 divided by 8. Anything? How about 9? 10? 11? 12? 13, divide by 13 for me. What about 14? 14 and 3, don't we already have that one listed? Okay, so that's when you know you've listed out all the factors. We call it when it wraps back around. So we went as far as to list them all, and then all of a sudden we saw these again. So we have listed all of them. Does everybody understand? Okay, now we're going to look at those factors and see if we were to put a negative sign on one of them, or both of them, or neither of them, how could we make it add up to be negative 1? So 2 and 21, could that ever add up to be negative 1? No, so those are not the factors we're going to use. 3 times 14, could it ever add up to be negative 1? Nope, so we're not using those factors. How about 6 and 7? Couldn't those possibly add up to be negative 1? Yeah, but which one would need to be negative? 6 or 7? It needs to add up to be negative 1. 7, right? Now you have to check it. Here's the trick. You've got to check it in both places. Does positive 6 times negative 7 equal negative 42? Yes. correct? So we're good because positive 6 plus negative 7 also equals negative 1. You have to have check marks in both places. So if this did not multiply to be negative 42, then we couldn't use them. Does that make sense, everybody? It has to work in both cases. It has to be perfectly true in both cases. So those are our factors, guys. Now this is what we're going to remember. Everybody look back at the original problem. It was negative 1x or negative 1n. We're rewriting negative 1 as in negative 1n as these two, but with n. Because, I mean, we're rewriting negative 1n as these two things. So we're going to put n's on those so we don't forget we're going to have an n with those. We have figured out and we've chosen what we're going to rewrite negative 1n as. So now we're to the step where we're going to drop and break. So I'm going to erase this because I like to, or I'm just going to rewrite it real quick. So I like to do all this work off on the side and leave this. So we have x squared or n squared minus 1x and then minus 42. Okay, what we're going to do is we're to the step where we drop and break. So we drop down our n terms. That's our first step. Everybody, let's drop them down. So you'll write an x squared. This is negative 42, so write negative 42. Leave some good space in between. Do you see how I drop my n terms down exactly as they are? Then I break my middle term down. So we're rewriting negative 1x as these two things, but we put an n, it's n's, but variable doesn't matter, so 6x plus negative 7x. So now understand something. It doesn't matter if I put negative 7x first, then plus 6x, or if I put plus 6x minus 7x. So order won't matter. Your factors will come out the same. So I'm going to insert just randomly choosing positive 6x. You see how that's positive 6x? So write plus 6x. Then we had a negative 7x. So we're going to write, so plus negative 7x, isn't that just the same thing as minus 7x? So I'm going to write minus 7x. Does everybody feel good so far? So we've done the drop and break part. And now we have four terms. Look. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is where we factor, by grouping. So now we're going to group the first two terms, and we're going to group the second two terms. Now here's one rule of thumb. Always group that sign in. If it's a plus sign, factor it in, group it in. If it's a negative sign, group it in. So now we're to our part where we focus on each group and factor out what's in common. So I'm just going to focus on this first group and say, what's the greatest common factor? X, right? So I'm ignoring this right here for a minute. I'm going to factor out an X. So then we're going to go back, just like we did with GCF. We factor out an X, but then we have to go back, right, and divide each term by what we factored out to put back in our parentheses. Remember back to GCF, we just tested on it. X squared divided by x in the first term leaves us with an x, correct? And then positive 6x divided by x is positive 6. We have plus 6 left. Does everybody feel comfortable with that piece? So now we're going to focus on this group and factor out the greatest thing in common. And you always factor out that sign with it. So it's a negative. So we're going to factor out a negative. So don't they both divide by 7? So I'm going to pull out negative 7. So just like with any other GCF, divide both by negative 7. And you're going to be really, really careful. Negative 7 over negative 7 is positive 1, correct? So an x is left. And then we have, very carefully here, negative 42 divided by negative 7. Won't that be positive 6? So plus 6. Now this is where you have a safe haven. You can say at this point that you know you've done it correctly. We're not done yet, but we know we've done it correctly. Here's why. This is our safe haven. Do you see how in our parentheses is exactly the same? If you factored it correctly, then they will be exactly the same. Even if the sign's different, you've done something wrong. Does everybody see how they're the exact same? So we're going to factor that out. Remember, there's 2 terms here. On the test, we had a problem like this. I said factor out the GCF. So isn't there an x plus 6 in common? So we'll factor out our safe haven, x plus 6. So then we'll go back and write what was left inside the parentheses in each term. So we pull out x plus 6. So we divided by x plus 6. We divided by x plus 6. So then let's see what was left in this first term. X plus 6 over x plus 6 is 1. There was an x left, correct? X plus 6 over x plus 6 is 1. So we have a minus 7 left. And now we have factored it completely. Now notice, this is a linear factor and a linear factor. That's how we know we're done. We have 2 linear factors. If you're done, you should only have 2 linear factors. 1, 2. Everybody feel good about it. So it's a long process, but it gets way easier and you go way quicker once you get the hang of it. Okay, should we do another one? Okay, we'll go a little bit quicker this time. So number 2, we have, remember you're looking at number 2 on my example. We have, it should be, scribble that out and write this in. It should be x squared plus 7x, not x cubed plus 7x squared. So it should be this problem on my board. So the first thing we do before we ever do a times c and adds up to b is say, is there a greatest common factor? So is there? What's in common? So we're going to factor out an x. So when we factor out an x, we'll go back and divide each term by x to see what's left. But make sure you don't just divide it out. You got to write it. It didn't disappear. So then left in our first term is x. And then we have a plus 7 left, correct? Now if you look at it, guys, if you look at it, isn't this degree 1, degree 1? So we're done. Aren't they degree 1? So we're done. That's how we know we're done. We factored it. Wasn't that much easier than a times c adds up to b? Yeah. Okay. Let's do another one where we will have to write it out. Here we go. So number 3, we have n squared plus 14n plus 48. Our first step is to say, is it in standard form? The answer is yes. Next step is to say, is there a greatest common factor? No. Is it quadratic? Yes. So then we go to our step where we do what multiplies. I'm going to go up here. What multiplies to be a times c and adds up to be b. So what is my a value really quick? A is what? 1. B is 14 and c is 48. So a times c, what multiplies to be 1 times 48 and adds up to be b, which is 14, correct? So now we start listing out factors. Let's have you start spitting them out to me really quick. So you guys divide 3, 4, 5, 6. You guys divide 1, 2. Ready, set, go. So you're doing 48 divided by 2. 2 times 24. 48 does it divide by 3? You guys? 3. Perfect. 3 times 16. Well, how about 4? 4 times 12. You guys do 6. You guys do 6. 4 times 12. Okay. 5. Okay, 6. 6 times 8. And 7. 8. 8 times 6. Did we wrap back around? We've listed all our factors. Which ones could possibly add up to be 14? 2 and 24? Nope. 3 and 16? Not quite. 4 and 12? 6 and 8. Okay, 6 times 8, does that equal positive 48? Yes. Does 6 plus 8 equal positive 14? Yes. So those are our factors. Now remember, 14n was what we're really looking at, so we're going to put n's on those. Now we're going to drop and break. So we drop down our n terms exactly as they are. So we're dropping down n squared. We're dropping down positive 48. Drop. Now break. We're breaking down the middle term. We're rewriting 14n as 6n and 8n. That's positive 6n, positive 8n. Order doesn't matter, so I'm just going to go with plus 6n plus 8n. Now we group the first 2 terms, and we group the last 2 terms. We group the first 2, we group the last 2, including the sign. And now we'll factor out the greatest thing in common in each group. In this group, what's in common? We're factoring out an n. So we'll write our n, then we'll go divide each term by n. So left right here is n, right? N squared over n. And then plus 6n over n is plus 6. Now we're going to ignore that stuff and just look at this group. We're pulling out 8 We always pull out that sign with it, so we're pulling out positive 8. So we write plus 8, divide by positive 8, divide by positive 8. So we're left with 8 over 8 is 1, so we're left with an n. Positive 48 divided by positive 8 is positive 6, so we have plus 6. Our safe haven is the same, so we know we've done it correctly. Our last step, we're almost there. This is literally the last step. Factor out your safe haven. So we factor out n plus 6. Now once we write it out here, we're going to go back and divide by n plus 6, divide by n plus 6. So then left in the first term is an n, left in the second term is a plus 8. Now we have the product, these are being multiplied together, the product of two linear factors. So this is linear, linear, so we know we're done. Yes? No. Nope. You wouldn't, actually. I just am doing it to remind us of, yeah, like that's when we know we're good. Good question. Okay, let's do just a couple more, then I'm just going to let you practice. Because if you just see a couple more, like, I think that will be pretty good. So they're just all a little different. So let's do another one real quick. So it's in standard form. There's no greatest common factor. So we're going to do what multiplies to be, well, first of all, A is 1, B is -3, and C is -40. So we're doing what multiplies to be 8 times C, what multiplies to be -40, and adds up to be -3. So factors of 40, you would take your calculator, divide by 2. So 1 times 40, we better not forget that. 2 times 20, right? Everybody? What else? 3, 4 times 10, 5 times 8, 6. The 6? No. 7? No. 8? Yes. 8 times 5. We've already listed that. So these are the only possible factors. Which ones could possibly add up to be -3? Not 1 and 40, not 2 and 20, 4 and 10 could add up to be 6, but nothing else. Or 14, right? But not 3. 5 and 8 could potentially add up to be -3. Now you got to be careful because it's got to add up to be -3. If it was +3, it would be different. So it's -3, so which one would my negative go with? 8, right? Now check it though. Does +5 times -8 equal -40? Yes. Does +5 plus -8 equal -3? Yes. So we have a check mark in both cases. So we're going to use +5 and -8. Now remember, these are the middle value, -3r. We're rewriting it as 5r minus 8r. So what we're going to do is now drop and break. So we drop down our n terms. We'll drop down r squared. We'll drop down -40. And now we break down the middle term as those two factors. That's a +5r, so I'm going to write that first, +5r, but it doesn't matter. And then minus 8r. I'm going to write this a little bit closer. We drop down -40. So now we're at the point where we group the first two terms and we group the last two terms, including the sign, with that last group. Now we're going to factor out the greatest thing in common here, which is an r. Divide by r, divide by r. So left is r plus 5, correct? In common here is an 8. 40 and 8 divides by 8. And this is a negative sign. So we always factor out the sign with it. So it'll be -8. Divide by -8. Divide by -8. So very carefully, -8 divided by -8 is positive r. -40 divided by -8 is positive 5. Check your safe haven. If it's the same, including the sign and everything, you've done it right. So we'll factor out r plus 5. Divide by r plus 5. Divide by r plus 5. So then left is r minus 8. Now we know we're done because it's degree 1, degree 1. And just like Sarah said, we won't write it. But that's how we know we're done. Okay. You guys ready to go for it yourselves? Okay. How about you do number 5 on that paper? Ready, go. Remember, your first step is to say, is there a greatest common factor? So, right? Show me when you got it. So do those ones. Everybody look up here. So on number 3, on I think your paper, right? It's not on your practice. You have 3x squared plus 60x plus 300. So what our first step we should do to make it easier on ourselves is right now we would say, okay, we could do a times c and add up to d, but we're going to be dealing with huge, huge numbers, and Sarah was running into this. So what we probably should look at and see is if there's a greatest common factor we can factor out. So isn't there a 3 in common in all the terms? That would be my first step, and if we do that, it's going to make it much smaller. So let's factor out a 3. Now if you factor out a 3, you got to write the 3. It doesn't just disappear. So we pull out a 3. Now go back, divide each term by 3. So then we're going to have an x squared, and then what's 60 divided by 3? Yep, so plus 20x, and then 300 divided by 3. Yep, very good. So now we factored out a 3. Now here's the thing. Now that we know how to factor a quadratic, we can keep going with this. So we can ignore 3 for a minute, completely ignore it, but it has to be in our final answer. Does that make sense? So I'm going to ignore 3 for a minute, ignoring that. We're going to just start in here. So what multiplies to be a times c, will that be 1 times 100? What multiplies to be a times c, which is 100, and adds up to be 20. And adds up to be b. So factors of 100. Now let's see if we can just think. Isn't 10 times 10 100? Won't those be the ones that add up to be 20? So do you see how once we get really good at these, we won't have to list them all out? However, there are still some, even in like my secondary math 3 honors, where I'm like, they're like, I can't think of any factors. I'm like, start listing them out. You know what I mean? So it doesn't hurt to list them out. So 10 times 10. Positive 10 and positive 10 in both cases. Okay, sweet. So remember that we're rewriting the middle term x as 10x and 10x again. So now we have to drop a break. So we're ignoring 3 clear till the very end. So we drop down x squared. We drop down positive 100. And then we're breaking down the middle term. So 20x can be written as positive 10x and positive 10x. And then we'll group the first 2 terms, and we'll group the second 2 terms, including the sign. The greatest thing in common in this group is x. So we'll factor out an x. So then left is x plus 10. And then in this group, the greatest thing in common is positive 10. So then divide by 10, divide by 10. So then left is x plus 10. We know we've done it correctly because our safe haven is the same. So we'll factor out x plus 10. So then it divided out once we pulled it out, right? So then left was x plus 10. So we have 2 linear factors, and yeah, they're the same, but that happens. And then we can't forget, though, we originally pulled out a 3. Everybody see what I did there? Okay. Go back to number 10 on the other page because you're going to see something like this, and we have to be able to do it. So x squared minus 49, we have to be able to factor something like this. The nice thing is factoring is the same for all quadratics. So now that you've learned the method, you don't ever have to learn another method. That is how you factor all quadratics. So we have x squared minus 49. So remember, quadratics have form ax squared plus bx plus c, correct? So don't we have an x squared and a c, but no bx? Yeah? So I'm going to actually want you to rewrite it or think of it as x squared plus 0 x's, because we don't have an x, minus 49. That's going to help you see what we're dealing with here. So now the process is the same. We're looking for my a value is 1, my b value is 0, and my c value is negative 49. So we do what multiplies to be a times c, which is negative 49, and adds up to be b, which is 0. Factors of 49. 7 times 7. And 1 times 49, correct? So isn't it going to be 7 and 7 that could potentially add up to be 0? But one of them would have to be negative. So let's check it. Is negative 7 times positive 7 negative 49? And then is negative 7 plus 7 positive 0, or 0? They're not positive, negative 0. Okay, so those are our factors. Now we're going to drop and break. So we drop our n terms down. So we drop down x squared. We drop down negative 49. Then we break down the middle term. And remember, that's what we're rewriting 0x as negative 7x plus 7x. Negative 7x plus 7x. Then we group the first two terms, we group the second two terms, including the sign, factor out what's in common. There's an x in common, divide by x. So then left is x minus 7. Over here, we're pulling out a positive 7. Divide by 7, divide by 7. So then left is x minus 7. We know we've done it correctly because our safe haven's the same. We have one last step, factor out x minus 7. So then it divided out and left us with x plus 7. We know we're done because we have the product of two linear factors, degree 1, degree 1. So it's no different. If you know how to factor any now you know how to factor any quadratic that I give you. But we always will factor out the greatest common factor first. And if you're missing your middle term, rewrite it as 0x. That will just help you. Okay, so I want you to finish your worksheet, but these are the problems you can cross out because it's just probably a little bit too much practice. And I don't want to overwork you. So you're going to cross out problems 5, 6, and 7 on your worksheet. But the rest I need you to do. So you should probably, for the most part, be able to get most of those, if not all of them, done by the end of the hour.